First person shooters, simple, right? Aim the little crosshair in the center and shoot. That's all you're gonna do. Okay, maybe there's a little bit more to do it than that. But what else? What else could you possibly need other than to aim and click? Turns out there's 3 really important factors to playing a game that make you better than the other guy. Once we got those figured out, we can be better more consistently. First up, we have time-based skill. This means playing more and more of any FPS game. This really helps out beginners, but there's a couple tips that maximize your gain from your time. The most important of those is to be cognizant. Don't run around like a headless chicken. Actually think and pay attention. If you focus and lock in, you'll gain more skill in a shorter amount of time. Okay, so those are helpful, but what time-based skills am I trying to improve? It's really everything. Movement, aim, eye placement, everything that is second nature to a good player. First, let's focus on aim. So here's the thing. When you're aiming, you gotta be thinking about where your enemies are gonna be. It doesn't help to be aiming at the ground because guess what? They're not there. It doesn't help to be aiming in the sky because guess what? They're not there. So where do you want to be aiming? Well, it depends. Look at my guy here. You see, he's got a head and he's got a body. Now, if you're really good at the game, you're going to want to aim at his head. Boop. There you go. That's a nice little kill. Now, if you want more consistent kills, more consecutive kills, you can aim for the body. But now, there's the thing. You have to combine this with your movement. You aim, slide out, and you have to be predicting where they're going to be. Let's look at this. Let's look at this scene right here. Does it make sense for someone to be standing right in this corner? No, not really. Does it make sense to be standing right behind this truck? Absolutely. So let's say you're coming out from over here. Where do you want to be looking? Well, you want to be looking at the truck, not in the corner, because there's not likely to be someone there. You want to predict. You want to say, hey, if I were in this situation, where would I be? I would be behind the truck. So I'm going to slide out, and I'm going to look at the truck. Now, we're in a new situation. Every time you slide, every time you come out to a new place, you got to be thinking about where the enemies are going to be. This is called crosshair placement. You don't want to have your crosshair placed all the way out here because then you get shot and you have to turn all the way over, aim, and shoot. Instead, what you want to be doing is you want to be predicting where they're going to be coming from, placing your crosshair where the enemy is going to be. And it's not just their general direction. You want to be placing it height-wise, too. You don't want to aim always down at their legs or at the ground because then you're going to miss half your shots and the other half are going to go into their toes, and that doesn't deal a lot of damage. Instead, you want to place your aim at a good position, around the body or around the head. That way, when you come around the corner, you're aiming at body level or head level, and you can consistently get more kills. Okay, what about eye placement? Yeah, this one I can't really help you with. You can't exactly demonstrate this one. It's really about looking where you need to, when you need to. Checking the mini-map, ammo count, and score of a match at critical moments. Really, the only way to get good at that is to play more of the game. It's simple, but when maximized, can really help you improve. Alright, we figured out time-based skills, but what are the other factors? Well, one of them is your input. Now, I don't mean go from KBM to controller. Rather, I mean tuning everything about your setup to exactly what you need. Here are some tips that help me out. Okay, so CS has a really nice system for this, so we'll use it to examine different input properties. In games like this in Valorant, there are 2 major things to consider. Your crosshair and sense, aka the mouse input, which is, you know, how you kill people, and then your screen. With your crosshair, you want to find something comfortable. Don't be afraid to change it, and don't be afraid to change it often. I myself recently went from a cross pattern to a dot and improved my aim a bit. Then I went back to the cross pattern and found out that it was just placebo, and I actually did better with the cross. Now, for sensitivity, try slowly lowering it until you feel like it's too slow, and then turn it a bit back up. Between each time you lower your sense, try playing a short game or testing it in a firing range like this, or shooting at bots. Now talk about the screen. A lot of players prioritize frames over quality. Here's the thing though. Personally, I like to keep a good balance. I don't want it to be too detailed because then I get a lower frame rate. But if I have a bad detail, I can't see what's going on from a distance. So I like to keep a good mix of custom settings. Don't just pick low, medium, high. Actually tune it to what you want to see. Here's the thing though. Another thing you want to check is you want to make sure FPS is capped to what your actual monitor runs at. If your FPS is capped to 30 but your monitor can run 120, then you're losing 90 frames. And that can make a big difference in how you perform and how you actually play in game. Now, Some games like Call of Duty and Fortnite have a lot of different visual settings, ranging from image quality to flashbang effects in FOV. Generally speaking, these all depend on personal preference. For example, I like to max my FOV and turn motion blur off, but keep flashbangs bright instead of dark. Alright, the final factor to improving your skill is the big one, game sense. This goes game by game and largely differs, but I can show you tricks for both faster paced games and tactical shooters. First, let's hop in COD to examine fast FPS games. Now COD has a couple good tricks to learn. First, let's talk about movement. You don't always want to use movement. You don't always want to slide, you don't always want to dolphin dive, and you don't always want to jump. It depends on the situation. Use movement wisely, and don't become a YY TikToker who spams it and still loses the match. So let's look at some examples of when to use each. First up, let's talk about bad slides. Oh, I'm sliding in the middle of nowhere. This is helpful, sure, but it's not really doing much. I'm not getting into cover, and I'm not getting out of cover. That's a bad slide. You slide out in the middle of nowhere, and now you have nowhere to go, and you're probably going to get beamed if they're not a literal recruit bot. Now, let's examine a good slide. The thing about a good slide is what it does is it takes you and it puts you in a good position. I'm still pretty close to cover, but I also pop out suddenly. Now I'm standing for better accuracy. I can continue jump, I can jump back, I can do all sorts of stuff. So let's try that. Slide out, jump, and then boom. Now, your angle also matters. That slide was much better than a slide out like this, because now I have no cover. Cover is very important, and that leads right into the second point, positioning. Now, right here, is this a good position? Yes. Why is it a good position? Because I have a head glitch. It's really easy for me to shoot my opponent, and it's pretty hard for them to shoot me. Now, is this a good position? No. Why? Because I don't have any cover, and the opponent has cover there. They've got cover from these buses, and cover from this thing, as well as those hedges over there. This is a bad spot to be in. Something like this is much preferable. Okay, so we've talked about positioning, and we've talked about movement, but what else do we have? Well, there's spawns. The enemy's got to spawn somewhere, so how do we figure that out? Well, it's pretty simple. If you're a game developer, do you really want your enemies to be spawning right next to your other enemies? No, that's stupid. What you instead want to do is you want them to spawn on the other side of the map so they have time to move, get used to the map, and do whatever they need to do before coming into contact. As you can see, I just died to yellow, and now I spawned on blue house. Here's the thing, though. We can manipulate that. Because if I say, oh, here's my enemy. Okay, well, here's my enemy. Now I'm going to go over to blue house. Now the game is going to say, well, there's a person at blue house, so let's spawn the enemy over at yellow house. So, now, when are you actually going to use this? Well, here's the time you might use it. Domination, hardpoint, any modes like that. Let's say, for example, the point is here on this green car. Do you really want the enemy to spawn at blue house? No, you want them to spawn at yellow house. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to move over to blue house to force them to spawn at yellow house. Now your enemy is going to spawn at yellow house, and you have basically a free hardpoint. Same goes for domination and any other mode like that. Alrighty, so now that we know our positions and we know our spawns, let's talk about the last most important thing, the minimap and the UAV. The minimap seems pretty useless at first. What does it do? It tells you, hey, there's enemies here. Go kill them. But it does much more than that. What it also does is it tells you, hey, all the enemies are on yellow side. That means I should probably stick with my team on blue side. It tells you, hey, there's 3 enemies here. Maybe I shouldn't slide cancel into this big fight. It tells you, hey, you've got a problem. You have enemies on point. Go clear them out. It's really useful, and that intel is incredibly helpful to any sort of player. You need to constantly be looking at your minimap and constantly be paying attention. Don't be one of those guys that says, oh, I don't need to look at my map. I have reaction time. Well, while you might have reaction time, and maybe you are in fact good enough, why not make your life a little bit easier and just use the minimap anyways? Alright, so we've talked about minimaps, we've talked about spawns, we've talked about positioning, and we've talked about movement. What else is there? Really? Not much. When you're playing a game, it's kind of a combination of all these. You got to be thinking about all these things at the same time, constantly be calculating, figuring out where you want to be spawn-wise, what kind of movement you want to use in each position, and all sorts of stuff like that. So, that's kind of it. You just got to get used to the game, practice, play more, think about these things constantly. Don't play aimless. Don't be a headless chicken. Actually pay attention and really focus when you're playing your game. Okay, now that we've examined some COD tricks, let's take a look at some CS ones. Now, this game is definitely different from COD, but similar to games like Valorant, Siege, and Fragpunk. There are a lot of tricks for games like these, but here are some of the simple ones. Alright, so, first up, let's talk about headshots. Now, in a game like this, and a lot of games, you want to prioritize headshots. But there's two different things to worry about here. First of all, guns have recoil. Games like Siege, Valor, and CS2, the recoil is pattern-based, meaning every time you shoot, the pattern is going to be about the same. The second thing you want to consider is that if you're moving, your pattern is going to be significantly worse, and it's going to be nearly impossible to hit an accurate shot. So how do you prevent this? Well, you stop moving. So what that means is that you don't want to be moving while you're shooting. Moving like this, as you can see, there's no chance of hitting anything. Another thing you want to consider is when to swing. If I know an enemy's coming from here, and I swing out, I can catch them off guard. For example, here, you can catch an enemy off guard. Of course, that requires being talented, and I'm very much not so. But it still can be useful. Now, another trick is to learn how to move silently. When you're aiming and you're playing against game sense, you want to think where your opponent is on the map. If you look at the minimap, you can see a ring. That ring shows where the enemy can hear me. If I know there's an enemy at B site, I don't need to worry about walking and crouching or anything like that while I'm all over here, because they're not going to be over here. But as I get closer, that's not good. Oops. But as I get closer to B site, or in this example, A site, I might want to switch to a walk. As you can see, the ring goes away, and now the opponent has no idea I'm here. This is just another example of using time and thought process to actually think about what you're doing. Now, another thing that I can teach you is aim rotations. Stuff like this, where I'm aiming, you flick. Rotations, flicks, whatever you want to call them, they're pretty effective and they're pretty clutch to use, but you have to know when to use them. What you don't want to be doing is aiming in a corner and flick 90 degrees as soon as you turn around the corner. Instead, predict and only flick when there's more than one enemy on your screen. Flick is a emergency situation to use. It's not something you want to be using constantly, and it's not something you want to be spamming all the time. Now, in games like Valor and CS2, there's a thing that a lot of new players do called crouch spamming, when they crouch and they shoot. Now, this isn't bad in CS2, and it's in fact pretty recommended. It controls your recoil, makes it a lot easier to shoot, but in Valorant, well, new players, like you're a new player, they like to aim for the body because the head is a lot harder to hit. When you're moving, it can be difficult. But here's the problem. When you aim at the body like this, that's your body. But if you crouch, what was your body is now your head, which means that enemies that are shooting at your body are now shooting at your head, which means you're basically giving them a free kill by crouching. So what I like to do is mix it up. Occasionally crouch and shoot, but also keep your head up. And it really depends on the situation. If you know the enemy likes to keep body level shots and they're coming around a corner where they would expect an enemy to be, then don't crouch, because then they're going to be expecting you and they're going to be able to shoot you. What you can do is, if you know the enemy is not expecting you and you know that they're not thinking you're going to be there, then you can crouch, because they're not having their aim prepped and they're not ready to peek the corner with a proper aim set. Okay, we did it. We figured out how to aim, how to maximize your setup, and how to think in a game. Now the trick is to apply it and remember these tips while playing. Good luck, and if you win a game because of me, don't forget to subscribe.